On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My sister-in-law called us inheritance thieves for wanting to adopt, and her fiancé discovered the whole truth about her. My husband, who is 38, and I, who am 37, recently made a decision that would change our lives, to adopt a child. A few days ago, we decided to share this exciting news with his family over a special dinner. To give a little context, we have built our life together over the last 12 years, 7 of them as a married couple. Although we had initially decided not to have children, as time went by our hearts and perspectives changed. We opted for adoption as our path to parenthood, mainly because I prefer to avoid possible health complications related to pregnancy. We had already shared the news with my parents, who welcomed us with open arms and overflowing joy. Naturally, we expected a similar reaction from my husband's family. And in general, that was the case. His parents especially showed genuine happiness for us. However, there was one notable exception, my sister-in-law, whom I will call Denise, 30, whose reaction was completely different. My relationship with Denise has always been like an emotional roller coaster. There are times when her kindness towards me is remarkable, but at other times, her attitude changes in a way that is difficult for me to understand. During the announcement, her lack of enthusiasm was palpable, but what came next was even more surprising. The crucial moment came after dinner, just before dessert. Denise's fiancé went outside for a smoke, and that's when she decided to let out all her frustration. The tension on her face was evident as she began her confrontation, asking us directly what were we up to. Her accusation left us completely perplexed, but what followed was even more shocking. She accused us of using the adoption as a calculated strategy to obtain a larger portion of her parents' inheritance. Even her own parents were stunned by such an accusation and tried to stop her, but she continued her tirade unchecked. My husband and I were left speechless, genuinely shocked by an accusation we could never have imagined. To put this situation into context, it is important to mention that my in-laws are very well off and have been very open about their will, which we are all familiar with. They have made special provisions for their grandchildren, appointing the parents as trustees of the corresponding trusts. Denise's accusation was not only emotionally hurtful, but completely devoid of logic for several reasons. First, the idea of adopting a child simply to benefit ourselves financially had never crossed our minds. We are not that kind of people, nor are we in such a desperate situation. Second, if that were our plan, it would be extremely impractical, considering that the adoption process is notoriously long and complex. We are only in the initial stages, and we know that it could be months or even years before we can welcome a child into our family. Furthermore, the trust is specifically designed to benefit the child. We would only be administrators of those funds until he or she turns 18, and any misuse of that money would constitute financial fraud, something neither my husband nor I would ever consider. Most important of all, my in-laws are in excellent health. In their early 60s, they lead an active and healthy life, so any concern about an immediate inheritance is completely unfounded. Furthermore, the will is structured in such a way that when Denise has children of her own, they will receive the same treatment in terms of the trust. I recently discovered that the root of her anger was in her confusion about the applicability of these provisions. During the altercation, we were initially paralyzed by surprise, but eventually we began to defend ourselves. Although we tried to remain calm and dignified, our emotions took over and the volume of the discussion increased considerably. We were so absorbed in the confrontation that we didn't notice when Denise's fiancé returned to the room, and neither did she. My in-laws continued to try to calm the situation without success. When we finally became aware of his presence, we decided to end the argument to avoid creating a negative image in front of this new family member. The atmosphere became so tense that everyone chose to leave without trying the dessert. 2 days passed with no news from anyone, until yesterday, 3 days after the dinner. Denise called me. She explained that she had had a strong argument with her fiancé, who had heard enough of the confrontation and had pressured her to explain the full context. She finally gave in, hoping that he would support her, but instead he was disgusted by her behavior. Now Denise is asking me to help her convince her fiancé that it was all an inside joke between us. However, I doubt very much that he would believe such an explanation, given that the intensity and seriousness of our discussion made it clear that we were not joking. I expressed my doubts about the credibility of this strategy, but she insisted that she would make the story believable if I would just confirm that it was a joke. After briefly reflecting, I decided to refuse to participate in her plan. I explained that her behavior had been deeply disrespectful towards my husband and me, and that I had no obligation to help her get out of this situation. I ended the call and blocked her, a decision that my husband and I considered appropriate. However, my in-laws have a different opinion. They called us later to inform us that Denise's fiancé is seriously considering ending the relationship due to the magnitude that this fight has taken on. They are asking us to intervene to try to fix the situation, but honestly I don't think we should, even if it means the end of their relationship. Addition, to provide more context, Denise and her fiancé have been together for 2 years. He is a really nice person, and we have developed a good relationship with him. As for the family dynamic, my in-laws do not show favoritism between Denise and my husband. There is no favorite child in this situation. They are simply concerned parents who want the best for their daughter and naturally want to prevent their engagement from ending in a breakup. That is why they are doing everything they can to save the relationship, and they believe that our intervention could make a difference. Given that I have an excellent relationship with my in-laws, I have begun to doubt my decision, as I would not want this to affect our relationship. This is the source of my current confusion, and I would very much appreciate advice and guidance on how to handle this situation. Update 1. I sincerely thank all of you who took the time to comment on my previous post. Over the last 2 days, my in-laws have been trying to get in touch with me repeatedly. However, I have been avoiding their calls, mainly because I found myself in a complicated situation. I knew they would not be happy if I expressed my decision not to get involved, so I chose to keep my distance, hoping that the situation would resolve itself. The reason they were specifically addressing me was because Denise had explained to them that only I could help solve the problem. According to her, since I was the one who participated the most in the discussion when her fiancé found us, it would be more convincing if I were the one to assure him that it had all been a joke, instead of his brother. This was the reason why they were being so insistent with me. Today, I finally made the decision to answer their calls. When I answered, I was direct and honest. I explained that I did not feel comfortable participating in this type of deception, especially considering how disrespectful and insensitive Denise had been with her comments. I told them that I did not feel obliged to help someone who had not only shown no remorse, but had not even genuinely apologized for their behavior. Furthermore, I made them see that it was unlikely that I would be able to help in this situation, as her fiancé would hardly believe that something so serious could be an inside joke, especially given the tone and intensity of our discussion. My in-laws listened carefully to my explanation, and then, with obvious concern, apologized to me on behalf of their daughter. They explained that they really wanted to avoid a breakup between Denise and her fiancé, as the relationship seemed to be on the verge of collapse. I could hear the desperation in their voices, and when I noticed that my mother-in-law was on the verge of tears, I felt that I couldn't completely stay out of it. I proposed a compromise. Although I absolutely refused to lie, I offered to talk to Denise's fiancé to better understand the situation, as it seemed strange to me that a 2-year relationship was about to end because of a single disagreement. If I'm completely honest, my decision to get involved wasn't just out of compassion for my in-laws. I also thought about the long-term consequences. I didn't like the idea of being partially responsible for a breakup that would permanently affect the family dynamic. With Denise as my sister-in-law, family gatherings would inevitably be awkward, and avoiding them would also mean distancing myself from the rest of the family. With this in mind, I decided to contact her fiancé to better understand the situation, as I had a feeling that there was more at stake than met the eye. It seemed unlikely to me that a couple who had been so much in love until recently would be considering splitting up over what we had been told was just an argument. When I called him, although the conversation started somewhat awkwardly, I explained that I had heard about his argument with Denise and wanted to talk to him about it, as I felt they might be rushing into things. I made it clear that, although he was not on good terms with Denise at the time, I thought he might be more receptive to a reasonable conversation. Before he could continue, he surprised me by revealing that the real reason for their conflict went far beyond the incident at dinner. He explained that, although the argument had started because of the events of that night, and he had insisted that Denise apologize to us for her disgraceful behavior, the situation had escalated when she accused him of favoring his brother, just like the rest of the family. It was then that he confronted her about her tendency to play the victim and fabricate stories about alleged family favoritism. He revealed to me that for years, Denise had been constructing a false narrative about how her parents had always favored her brother, presenting him as the golden child, even though all the interactions he had witnessed proved otherwise. She had even gone so far as to claim that her parents treated me more like a daughter than they did her, which was clearly untrue. Although they appreciated me, their love for Denise was undeniable. Most shocking was his revelation about Denise's financial behavior. Apparently, she took out substantial loans from her parents every month, making excuses even though she had a stable job that allowed her to support herself. When he had questioned her about it before, she had justified these actions by saying that she was building up savings because she thought her share of the inheritance would be less than her brother's. She had fabricated this whole story of family favoritism simply to justify her self-serving behavior. After listening to these revelations, I was speechless. I apologized for having bothered him and told him that I needed time to process all this information before hanging up. Since then, I have only shared these details with my husband, and we are now in the difficult position of having to decide how to communicate the situation to my in-laws. My husband, understandably, reacted with great indignation and wanted to confront Denise immediately about her lies. However, I convinced him that a direct confrontation would not be productive at this point. Our main concern should be how to communicate this situation to her parents, who will probably be devastated to discover that, despite all their efforts to raise their children with love and fairness, their daughter had been manipulating the situation in this way. What makes this situation especially painful is that it was precisely they who asked me to intervene to help their daughter, concerned for her happiness, while she had been defaming them all this time. It is a testament to their unconditional love as parents, and makes Denise's behavior even more inexplicable and ungrateful. As a daughter, I find it hard to imagine how anyone could respond with such ingratitude to their parents' unconditional love and support. So far, I haven't found the courage to talk to my in-laws about this. My husband and I have decided that it would be best to communicate it to them together, although technically I was the one who received the information. We think it will be more appropriate for the news to come mainly from him, as their son, even though his parents have always treated me like another daughter. For now, we are taking time to process this information ourselves, as it represents a significant shift in the family dynamic. Writing all this down has helped me organize my thoughts and gain some clarity. Although it is late at night and we will not take any action today, tomorrow we will definitely inform my in-laws about everything we have discovered. It will be up to them to decide how to handle this situation. Although I hope things don't get too dramatic tomorrow, I'm realistic and know it will probably be unavoidable. I'm preparing myself mentally for what's coming, aware that this will probably cause significant upheaval in the family. Update 2. This morning, we decided to go ahead with our plan to reveal the truth to our in-laws, preferring to face the situation head-on. My husband and I called them, activating the speakerphone so that we could both participate in the conversation. Before they could ask about the events of the previous day, I took the initiative and began to relate everything I had discovered. When I finished my explanation, there was a deafening silence. After several seconds, when they finally managed to react, my mother-in-law broke down in tears. Although we had anticipated this reaction, trying to console her over the phone proved particularly difficult. As a mother, I can imagine the devastating pain of discovering that your own daughter has been defaming you and manipulating the situation in this way. My father-in-law, although he kept his composure better, also showed obvious signs of deep distress. They expressed their gratitude to us for having tried to help resolve the situation as they had asked us to, and especially for having spoken to Denise's fiancé to discover the truth. At that point, my husband intervened, suggesting that the appropriate response would be to disinherit her and cut ties completely, arguing that her behavior had been absolutely reprehensible. He emphasized how his parents had always made an effort to treat both children equally, even continuing with the monthly financial support until recently, responding to each of their requests without question. The contrast between this unconditional love and Denise's betrayal made the situation even more painful. My husband's indignation was palpable as he expressed his disgust at his sister's calculating behavior, especially considering that she had a stable job and the means to support herself. However, his parents, once again showing their understanding nature, expressed their desire to talk to her first and understand her motivations before making any drastic decisions. When my husband tried to protest, he was reminded that they would give him the same opportunity to explain himself if he were in a similar situation, which effectively silenced his objection. Personally, I think they made the right decision, as facing the consequences of her actions could be an important lesson for Denise. Later that same day, in the afternoon, we received a call from her parents asking if they could come over for dinner. We accepted their invitation, and it was evident that they wanted to discuss the events involving Denise. They told us that after our telephone conversation, they had gone to her house. Finding her alone, her fiancé had temporarily moved in with a friend, saying that he needed time to think. Although Denise seemed affected, they decided to proceed with the confrontation they had planned. When questioned about the revelations we had shared with them, instead of denying it, Denise reacted with hostility, berating them for their alleged lack of empathy in confronting her at a difficult time instead of consoling her. She accused them, once again, of taking our side over theirs, an unfounded accusation that only served to confirm everything we had said about her behavior. Her parents, remaining calm, expressed their intention to leave, which caused a dramatic change in Denise's attitude. She began to cry, begging them to stay, expressing her loneliness and her uncertainty about the future of their relationship. However, her parents stood their ground, confronting her with the lies she had been telling her fiancé about them and her financial manipulation. They reminded her how, despite knowing that her monthly emergencies were fabricated, they had continued to provide her with financial support, hoping that she had her reasons and giving her the benefit of the doubt. However, her ingratitude and the magnitude of her lies had exceeded the limits of their patience. As they tried to leave, Denise cried even more, begging them to let her explain. In her attempt at justification, she admitted to having an irrational fear of receiving a smaller share of the inheritance than her brother and I. When her parents asked her to explain the origin of this fear, especially considering that everyone knew the contents of the will, she could not provide a coherent answer. Her parents pointed out that, even though she could now recognize the irrationality of her fears, the damage had already been done. She had destroyed valuable relationships because of these unfounded fears, and her actions had reduced her to the role of a mere gold digger. Despite her continuous attempts to retain them with more tears, her parents remained firm in their decision to leave. After returning home and processing the events, they proceeded to block her on all platforms before coming to share these events with us. My husband and I assured them that, although we knew this decision must be incredibly difficult, they had done the right thing. We reminded them that any future consequences of their actions would be Denise's sole responsibility, and that they should not torment themselves over it. After this conversation, we tried to change the subject to something more positive, focusing on our adoption process. We enjoyed a quiet dinner and, after they left, my husband and I reflected on everything they had told us. We came to the conclusion that Denise's explanations were simply excuses to justify her self-serving behavior. We don't believe she really had irrational fears about the inheritance. She simply coveted the money and was unwilling to admit it honestly. However, at this point, the consequences of her actions are undeniable. She has destroyed valuable relationships at her own hand. Although I can't say I feel sorry for her, I hope she finds a way to take responsibility and start repairing the damage she has caused. For our part, we are relieved that this situation has come to an end and that we no longer have to get involved. Update 3. It's been a week since my last update, and there has been a significant development recently. Denise and her fiancé officially announced their breakup last night through a post on social media, with comments deactivated. Although I have blocked Denise on every possible platform to avoid any contact, she managed to send an email to her brother expressing that she would never forgive either of us for ruining her life. Apparently, she is still convinced that the argument that took place during that dinner was the trigger for all this, and in a way she is right. However, that argument was simply the first domino that caused all the others to fall, and it was she herself who set it in motion. That's why I don't understand her complaints or her attitude. Either way, it doesn't really affect me if she never forgives us. I am on good terms with the rest of the family, and frankly, forgiving someone who has acted in such a manipulative way is not something that keeps me up at night. She was the one who destroyed everything with her own hand, and until she accepts that, she will hardly be able to begin to repair the damage she has caused. But I have already spent enough time talking about her. As for our adoption process, things are moving forward positively. We are in talks to take in a 5-year-old in the coming weeks, an age we consider perfect for our situation. We are scheduled to meet him in a couple of days, and I can't contain my excitement. I can already feel my maternal instincts blossoming, and right now I just want to stay away from any kind of drama so that I can devote all my energy and attention to this new stage in our lives. Both my parents and my in-laws are incredibly excited at the prospect of becoming grandparents. Although it is a bit premature to celebrate, as we are still in the early stages and there is much to be defined, their enthusiasm is contagious. We all share a great enthusiasm for what is to come. My greatest hope is that, from this point on, everything will continue to develop in a positive way.